Hi.
How are you?
Oh, good.
I see
Am
Stacy, I see Amy, Jen, Gary, and Anna. Thank you everyone for joining me this morning. Um, I am going to do a little bit of talking first, and basically the purpose of today is to dispel some fears. If you have a machine and you've been afraid to use it, if you've been considering one but don't know where to start, I am not here to give everyone access to free therapy on an unlimited basis. But I think if you understand some of the basic concepts and I share some of my experience today, you should be able to navigate this amazing world of vibration plates on your own. So for today's call, I kind of like to put myself out there. I am going to leave some time for questions at the end, but I'm not here pretending to be a therapist. I don't work with each of you individually, so it's very hard for me to give black and white answers that are going to suit everyone. So again, today's going to be very much, I'm going to talk a little bit about machines. Um, you know, Perhaps you've been comparing them, the different types of machines, and we're also going to get into a couple of very basic exercises that probably aren't going to suit everybody, but there should be something that everyone here can use. If you're joining me via the Cerebral Palsy vibration page, you've probably seen some of my information. Many of you are also here from Dr. Park's selective dorsal rhizotomy page, and many of you are in my page for that reason. But not everyone has SDR. The group that I'm a part of, really, this cerebral palsy group kind of started with another great lady named Jennifer, and I've stepped in a couple of years ago to help her support with some of the technical stuff and allow her to focus more on her child. So for those of you that are here, if there's anyone you want to share this with after the fact that wasn't able to attend, because it's Zoom, it's going to take me about a day to get this uploaded and recorded. So this will be available by tomorrow on the group if anyone's interested in looking at it. So first of all, we're going to talk about plate types. I'm going to get right into it. There's lots of different vibration machines available for sale. And sometimes it depends on what part of the world that you're in as well, as far as what choice you may have in selecting equipment. I have a little something I want to drop in the chat here. Everything that I'm talking about today is in the group to a degree. So if there's any documentation, anything that I'm going to be placing in here today will be something that you guys can access after the fact. But I'm going to drop this in the chat. When we talk about machine types, as I said, there's quite a few different ones out there. What I think it's important to understand is there's never a best machine for every single application and every single body out there. There's a lot of factors that come into selecting a machine. And the very first one I'm going to recognize is budget. So, I can talk to you all day long about the best of the best and the research, and for those of you that have the ability to obtain such quality devices, that's phenomenally fabulous. Or if you can get funding, but the vast majority of the people that I deal with in this group and have come to know through my coaching sessions over the last couple of years are not purchasing medical grade equipment. So I'm going to go there today with the difference between, what is a Galileo and a Hypervibe versus what's on Amazon or eBay and those types of things. So I've just posted a document. You do not have to read this right now, but I'm going to give you a very brief explanation. There's a lot of different movement types, and I'm going to try and crash course that down. And I'm going to use a visual with my arms. The very first type of movement that I'm going to talk about. So instead of machine types, there's different movement styles, and there's two primary ones that I want you to consider and focus on. And then there's a bunch of new ones out there that have come kind of to the surface through the consumer side, the eBays, the Amazons. But the primary movement of whole body vibration, the very first machine, the majority of the research, I will give credit to Galileo. Galileo is an oscillating or teeter-totter or pivotal. There's lots of different names out there, but it moves like a teeter-totter. And when you're standing on the plate, and I will get to some demos on a plate today, it kind of mimics that movement of walking. It's very natural, it's very functional, and I as a coach prefer oscillating. I stress the word prefer because it really does boil down to a preference. You know, regardless of what movement style may or may not be supported by science or is claimed to be the best, it really boils down to you as the individual user or whomever that you're caring for. If they like how it feels, they're probably going to keep using it. If they don't like how it feels, they're probably not going to be too excited to use it. And what I can say in my 15 years of using all kinds of different machines, I've been very fortunate in my time in the I got in very early for my own health reasons, like many of you, but they didn't have home machines. They didn't have $200-300 machines. They had medical devices. So my very first vibration plate was what's called a Vibragym. And unless you've been around the block a long time or you're in Europe somewhere, Vibragyms aren't as common as they used to be, but many of you would know who they used to be, which is a company called PowerPlate. So I started in the vertical side, which is the other type that has a lot of science, a lot of studies behind it, but there are differences between the two. And I'm going to break that down very briefly. So oscillating plates, the side to side, the pivotal, the oscillating, they have, generally speaking, slower frequency ranges and higher amplitude ranges. What is amplitude? Amplitude is how much the machine is moving you each time the plate moves. So if you're standing on it, if you're sitting on it, whatever you're doing on it, each time the plate moves, the distance it is moving you each time is referred to as amplitude. And when I get into the demo, it'll make a little bit more sense. But amplitude is probably, in my opinion, the biggest, most important lesson that I can teach you, regardless of speed, regardless of exercise. The amplitude, which is essentially the position in which you place your feet or your hands, controls the intensity of the stimulation, of the vibration the plate is generating, the movement. So when we're dealing in my cerebral palsy group, the vast majority of you are little people, or you're working with little people. We're dealing with littler bodies. There's ways that you can adjust the amplitude or the distance between their feet for tolerance, for comfort, to reduce the intensity for those little bodies, if that makes sense. On a vertical style platform, the amplitudes are fixed. So the frequency ranges are much, much higher, does not mean better. A bigger number doesn't mean you're getting more benefit. There's a mentality in this world that if we go faster, we must be getting more out of it. Well, you know, you can drive your car to the grocery store at 100, or you can drive it at 50. You're still going to get to the grocery store. You might get a ticket if you're going too fast. But my point being is the amplitude and how much intensity anyone can tolerate is going to vary. On a vertical machine, as I said, it's going to be, if you do have adjustable amplitude, typically on verticals you don't, but if you do, it's going to be a high or a low button. Whereas on your oscillating, your Galileos, your Hyper Vibes, majority of the consumer machines out there, if your feet are close, you're not moving as much. If your feet is wide, you're moving more. And whether you realize it or not, by changing your foot or your hand position, you're adjusting the amplitude. So that's kind of the most important lesson, regardless of what frequency or speed or level or whatever your machine represents, the intensity is controlled with that amplitude. I'm not going to get too much into vertical plates, but I do want to cross back over to them for a minute. If you look at my sheet, I've kind of broken platforms into different types within categories, but within a pivotal machine, pivotal is your Hypervibes, your Galileos that we discuss on this page. It's also your Bluefins, your Pinties, your Life Pros. There's quite a few consumer grade machines out there, and the biggest difference between the consumer grade machines and the medical grade, the Hypervibe and the Galileos, is the frequencies in which they produce. They are less. Typically, if I were to put a number on it, probably about 15 to 16 hertz is going to be the average frequency, regardless of what brand you are using, if you're spending under the $500 mark. If you are looking for more frequency, if you are working with one of these devices, or perhaps in a facility now that has them, the Hypervibes and the Galileos will go much, much faster. Hypervibes, their ranges, depending on which model, their G10 goes up to 25 hertz. Their G14 is 30, and the G17 goes upwards of 35. Galileo has a number of models, but their range is up there as well, typically in the 30 to 35 hertz range. What I will say in my experience on this page, there's a lot of discussion about this frequency is best for this, or this frequency is best for that, or you're only going to get results if you get this frequency. I'm going to take the opportunity now to step to the scientific side of this conversation. Again, I recommend a Pivotal platform for a number of different reasons. You're always going to get more machine for less money. It's kind of an engineering thing. So, and the vast majority of machines being sold may have multiple movements, but most of them have oscillating movement. Why? In my 15 years experience, most people prefer it. I have had in my day, in my studio, the very best verticals, the very best oscillatings, and putting them side by side, people always gravitate towards oscillating. Lineal has its place, and for any of you out there that are trainers or advocates of this technology, I love my vertical machines. But again, speaking with the vast majority of people that I work with in the home user market, oscillating is more preferred. It's less invasive on the head. It's not harmful to get vibration in the head, but it's a tolerance thing. And if you're dealing with pediatrics, or you're caring for a little one, you know, sometimes it tickles the ears and the nose, and you'll find it's more prominent on a vertical plate just because of the way that the machine moves. It's just the way that they are. Other types of movements I'll touch on very briefly. You've maybe heard of 2D or spiral or combinations of these. There's another type of movement that a number of the consumer manufacturers have come out with. They're not coming from a place of science. They're coming from a place of consumer demand. So these machines have been on the market now for a number of decades. And over time, consumers have said, well, you know, I want it to do this, or I want it to feel like this, or I want a purple one. So in the consumer world, these are not scientific companies. You know, there's many of them are selling good products, but they're not performance-wise as capable as the Hypervibes, the Galileos. There's a few other big brands in Europe that are capable as well. What I will say on the science side, there's a ton of research supporting the safety and efficacy. I'm not going to get into all of them because that would be a 2-day conversation, but Galileo has a healthy library of scientific study on their site. If you want to look a little bit more diverse, you can go into Google and type anything. So let's say you want to look up tight hamstrings or constipation, or, you know, different ways that you can use your machine. You can type this into Google, and I suggest at the end of your search, put the word scholarly or scholarly articles, and it's going to get you to more valid information. What I will say, and it's probably going to ruffle a few feathers with my Galileo and my Hypervibe people, the vast majority, as I said on this page, are not using medical grade. I wish you all had access to those type of plates, but if you are using a Hypervibe or a Galileo, in my experience as a trainer, I want you guys to have guidance. If you're using those machines that are capable of those higher frequencies where we're stimulating neurological systems, and you don't have a good trainer, or you don't have a good plan or a protocol as to what exercises you are to be doing, I can't provide that for you. I'm not working with your child. I'm not your therapist. I can certainly help you translate exercises that you have now. I can give you some of my own suggestions, but long-term, the best fit is to work with someone qualified to give you guidance on that device. For the vast majority of you that are working with home plates, you know, the vast majority of you don't have any instruction. Not everybody's had a call with me. And guess what? You're doing fine. So what I can say from my experience, unfortunately, even though science is lacking heavily, science is never going to explore every frequency, every amplitude, every exercise, every type of body. For the marketing that is out there is to a degree promoting and validating the research of the plate that is doing the research. So that's Galileo. So the majority of the research is going to be in the 20 plus range. But I'm going to say right here, right now, that doesn't mean that there's not benefit below those frequencies. There's bone density studies showing evidence at 12 hertz. There's balance in the slower frequencies. So there's a whole range of science that hasn't been validated yet. But anecdotally, all I can tell you is thousands and thousands of moms and dads and therapists are using low-grade plates, and they're still seeing tons and tons of benefit. So circling back to the beginning of my chat, when I talked about budget, you know, if you can't afford for, you know, I know raising a child with special needs, or if you have special needs yourself, you're already dealing with additional costs. I get that. And it's ridiculous that you are, but reality is there's additional costs to caring for your condition. So sometimes you want to get into this technology, but you don't have the budget, or you haven't got funding access to get invested in one of the higher performing medical grades. Many of my clients start with a used machine, a $50 machine somebody gave them. And you know what? If in a year or two you're using it and you're loving it, you know, then you at least have an introduction to this technology. You know you're going to be using it, and you may want to consider upgrading to a different plate within that company, or consider the Galileos and Hypervibes. But what I will say, if you are looking at a consumer grade machine, and I'm not going to get into a debate today with manufacturers about this is for families to learn. This isn't about marketing one plate over the other. This isn't one machine is better than the other. This isn't about bashing. I have people every day that reach out to me through this group that have never had a coaching session in their life. They've been using a plate for 4 or 5 months, and guess what? They're seeing their child's spasticity reduce. Their constipation has reduced. Their balance has improved. They've gotten stronger. What is a vibration plate? A vibration plate is simply an environment. It's an environment that increases the effectiveness of whatever position that you are doing on it. It reduces the amount of time and effort on the person on the machine. And bottom line, they're fun. If you're trying to do therapy with your child, the biggest gift that I can offer you with these machines isn't some new therapy that you got to be doing on top of everything else that you're already doing. I want you to understand that these plates are simply an environment that you can take the exercises, the stretches, everything that you guys are spending all this time doing now, and reduce the time that you spend doing therapy, and have more family time, or whatever time that it is that you want. So if you're spending half an hour to an hour massaging your kids' hamstrings, trying to get them straight so they can lay in bed at night, you need to consider a vibration plate. If you as a caregiver are looking after a child, guess what? Kids get bigger and they get heavier, and your back and your shoulders and your neck, you're paying the price now. So this is not just for the person that you're caring for. When you're selecting a plate, I would like everyone in the household to be using it. If you're using it, you're going to understand how it feels, especially if you're working with communication issues where verbally, you know, your kid can't say to you, oh my gosh, my ears are tickling, or my nose is tickling. If you're using this technology, even a couple of minutes a day yourself, not only are you going to understand how it feels and some of the newbie things that people go through, but you're going to have more energy. You're going to have better posture. You're going to sleep better. You're going to poop better if it's a problem. There's a lot of things associated with this technology that I call are soft benefits. So short term, you can improve your balance. You can reduce spasticity even within one session. But the real big benefits, the strength, the keeping these problems, all these symptoms at bay, is consistent regular use. So don't beat yourself up if you're not doing a big old workout or you're not doing all of your exercises today. Do something, do just a little bit and get into the habit of using this. If you're introducing this to your child or someone you're caring for, there's going to be about a 2 to 3 week period where they just get assimilated to it. How does it feel? Why are my feet tingling? There's a few things that you go through as an experience when your body's getting used to this machine. And then once you're comfortable and the fear is gone, which I assure you it will be, you can progress onto more effective things. Maybe it's squats, maybe it's touching your toes. Again, I'm not here to outline every exercise that you can do for CP. That would be impossible. But for a lot of your therapists and for you doing routines at home now, there's probably a lot of ways that you can do many of those exercises on the plate, even if you need to make some modifications. The document does not seem to be coming up in the chat, so I apologize for that. I will drop that in the feed with the recording, and I'll get it into the group chat here after the fact as well. I don't know why it's not coming up. I'm seeing it here on my end, but we're not going to waste any more time on that. Emily, you've asked about maximum time. I'm going to get to that because, again, it's not a great answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of rambling and putting you all to sleep, for those of you that are joining me here, maybe overseas early, or if it's later for you, I want to get to a few exercises. I will get to questions after the fact. I want to make sure I've covered everything that I need to while I'm sitting on my butt. And I want to just go over and do some examples. Now, I've got a few plates here. I want to see if I can get my view. The bigger picture here. I'm trying to get myself bigger. View speaker. Okay. Oh, that's better. Okay. So for those of you that have never done a session with me, the first thing I want to make sure that you have available is a bar height stool. What a bar height stool does is it allows you to reduce the amount of body weight that you are putting into the platform. So if you're dealing with poor mobility, poor range of motion, hang on, I don't think you can see me entirely. I'm going to back my camera up just a bit here, guys. Oh, appreciate your patience for my technical difficulties here. I just want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the reason I like using a bar stool is many of you don't have the best mobility and balance. And if you're just starting a plate for the first time, as I said a minute ago, it's about becoming assimilated to it. How does it feel? What feels good to me? What speeds and frequencies do I like? Which ones are getting a little bit too scary? So the reason I like starting on a bar stool or suggesting that you have one, and it might be a chair, depending on the body that you're dealing with, the goal of me sitting is to get these legs into a good 45 or good 90-degree angle. I don't want you going downhill. I don't want the hips lower than the knees. If you're a little bit higher, that's fine. Because I'm about 5'10", I'm sitting on a bar height stool, so I can get my legs up a little bit higher. If you're dealing with a child, a regular kitchen height chair or a stool or a yoga ball, you know, whatever kind of mimics getting these legs into this square position, that's really the goal. And on an oscillating plate, regardless of what plate you are working on, so if you are on a Galileo or a Hypervibe, if you are on a Bluefin, if you are on a Life Pro, it does not matter. They all move the same way in oscillating mode, okay? The difference is going to be the overall frequency range. So on your consumer grades, I am on a consumer grade machine. This is a Life Pro. This one has 4 or 5 different movements, but I am just doing this in oscillating. And you can see that my legs are slightly moving. Earlier, I was talking about amplitude. Amplitude is where all the control is at. You decide the intensity of the vibration by the position of your feet. So if you're really fearful, if you're in lots of pain, bring your feet closer to the center. And I recommend if you haven't done this and you've been using a plate for a while, play with it. It's a modification that you can make just to challenge the body, to change things up. But your feet dead center is the least amount of movement. Your feet at the outer edges is the most amount of movement. And I have doctors and therapists that tell me every day that everybody knows that the wider you stand, the more benefit you get. I am still waiting for that study. It does not exist. Wider does not mean better. It means more movement. And because you feel more things shaking, your skin's flapping all over the place, there's kind of we kind of think there must be more going on because there's more shaking. But the wider you put your feet or hands, the more impact you are exposing your body to. So I like to be functional. We're about being functional. We don't walk across the floor with our feet wider than our hips. The only time that I position my feet wider on a vibration platform is if I'm doing something specific, like maybe a wide squat, or maybe I'm doing some martial art moves or something, and I want to position my body like that. So for the purposes of this group, I want you to think functional. I never want to see your feet more than hip width apart. Generally speaking, when you're starting out, it will probably be closer. So if you don't remember anything else from my ramblings today, please remember amplitude is the one thing nobody talks about, but it's the simplest lesson I can provide you to feel in control while you're using your oscillating plate. On a vertical style plate, again, it's going to be a high-low button. It doesn't matter where you place your feet, it's going to be the same, but I still recommend think functional. Put those feet hip width apart, no more if you're doing basic exercises. And if you have a high-low option, play with what feels comfortable, but generally starting out, it really depends on the plate. So if you spend $100 on a vertical platform, it's probably going to have one frequency, one amplitude. It's a foot massager. If you've got a machine that's got a high and a low setting, it's probably of a little bit better quality. And I would suggest starting with the lower setting to see how it feels first. Now let's talk a little bit about speeds, levels, frequencies, and this is where some debate may occur. Again, I'm not here today to get into it with manufacturers about my plate is better, that one's no good, I don't want to hear things like the wrong machine will harm you. I don't want to hear things like the wrong machine will cause problems in any way, because there's never been a study that has shown harm from using a consumer grade plate. There's never been harm from showing a Galileo or a Hypervibe for that matter. But I will caution you again with the medical grade, if you're using frequencies in excess of those high ranges, I want instructional guidance. I want you getting help. I don't want you just figuring those type of machines out. They're just too capable. There's things I want you to understand. But in the consumer grade world, where everybody is self-serving anyways, the average machine goes about 15 to 16 hertz. And generally speaking, guess what? Galileo and Hypervibe also have those frequency ranges. So of course they're safe. But what I want to tell you is the really, really slow speeds, the really, really low hertz, they're really wobbly. They're really choppy. And they tend to be more associated with balance and stability. Now everybody's going, oh, I want to improve my balance and my stability. Absolutely you do. But we're dealing with a population that generally speaking is below baseline. You have issues, you have balance and stability concerns. So the really slower speeds on your oscillating plate, those choppy, wobbly ones, I don't want you using them starting out, because if you have poor balance, it's kind of like being on a Bosu ball that's going through an earthquake. You know, you're probably going to spook yourself. I would prefer you start seated and see how it feels. And as a starting point, I recommend bringing your speed or your frequency up. So if you're working with a home model, a consumer machine, you spent under $500 and you've got 100 speeds, I want you in the mid-range. The mid-range is going to be 50 to 60. If you're working with a Galileo or a Hypervibe, I want you getting up to at least 11, 12 hertz as a starting point. I don't want you using anything lower. You can, if you've got guidance and you know what you're doing, but I think generally speaking, you're going to find it's too choppy. It's too destabilizing. I want to improve your balance, but I don't want to challenge it yet. And that's what those slow speeds are going to do. So if you're a yoga queen and you want to do like yoga positions and balance, that's fine, because you probably got good stability and balance now, and you want to challenge it. The best way, in my opinion, to challenge your balance when you're using a vibration plate, or to improve it rather, is just to use it. Improved balance, and this is one of the reasons I prefer oscillating over vertical, is you're always destabilizing the body. You're always having to keep stable. This thing's moving from side to side. Balance is a side effect of using an oscillating plate, or should we call it a side benefit? I think you're going to lose my head if I stand up on camera, but one of the best ways to improve balance, if you are able to stand on the plate, perhaps you need something like this against the wall to hang on to. Perhaps you need a bar stool. You might need something to stabilize yourself, but just practice closing your eyes for 2, 3, 4 seconds, and then open them back up. Close them. You know, just do that while you're doing some of your standing exercises. And if you're able to stand and you're already doing squats and those types of exercises, you've probably noticed an improvement in balance without really having to make a whole bunch of extra effort. So do you have to do separate things to improve balance on your oscillating plate? You can, but many of my families find just with regular, consistent use, it's improving. And one of the great reasons I recommend as a spot treatment to use your plate for a minute or two for balance is just before you're heading out the door. Maybe your kid's going to school, or you're going to therapy, or you're just going to go shopping and you want to have a little bit more stability and relaxation in those muscles. Use your plate for a couple of minutes before you go. I'll get into the time thing here quick for who raised that question. So again, very briefly, if you're starting out as a starting point on your Galileos and your Hypervibes, bring the feet a little closer and start in the 11 to 12 range. For your consumer grade plates, use a mid speed or level. So again, if you've got 100 speeds, I want you in the 50 to 60 range. If you've got 50 or 60 speeds, you're going to be at 25 to the 30 range. And the beauty of having increments of speeds or frequencies, you know, you'll never hear me commit to one number. Yes, there's lots of studies out there. You know, there's a good study that Galileo and Hypervibe promote all the time about bone density. That's 20 hertz. But you know what? There's bone density proven at other frequencies as well. What it really boils down to is your personal tolerance. And I encourage, for those of you that have Galileos and Hypervibes, you got those machines for a reason. Those higher frequencies can reduce time further. There's another world of benefits, but not everyone can get there. I have a number of families that just struggle to get beyond 18, 19. It's just too aggressive for their tolerance. And that's really, you know, what I say as a number may be great, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily tolerable by everyone out there. It's just a personal preference. So for your consumer grade machines, for your Galileos, the beauty, the Hypervibe, whatever you're using, I encourage you to mix up whatever speed or frequency you are doing week to week to keep the body confused. So if you're using a Galileo or a Hypervibe and you've been doing everything at 10 or 11 hertz this week, change it up to 12 or 13. Drop it down to 9 or 10. Mix it up a little bit to keep the body confused. You don't always have to change all the exercises that you're doing. In fact, I recommend that you don't. You know, sometimes learning new moves and new exercises is just frustrating. And if you've gotten into a habit and a good routine, just by changing your settings week to week is a good way to keep the changes moving forward. Now, while I'm sitting here, I want to show you a couple of little tips. I have some torture tools here. For those of you that have never done a session with me, these are pool noodles, okay? I love using pool noodles on the machine for a couple of reasons. Pool noodles are a little less dense than your traditional foam rollers. And again, a vibration plate is just an environment. So there's toys you can incorporate in this environment to make your exercises more effective. And this is one of my favorite low-cost investments. If you have a pool noodle, I recommend getting both sizes. This is the larger one. And all that I've done is cut it in half. I've cut one lengthways and one's a full roller. And I like to use this if you're dealing with really poor mobility or spasticity in the heels. Everybody knows here what I'm talking about. When you put your feet on the plate, there's certain body parts that don't come directly in contact with the machine. So if you're trying to work with the arches of the feet, if you are trying to stretch the calves, you know, these are great little things you can experiment with, especially for those of you that lack the ability to bear weight. Gets a little boring just sitting here for a while, after a while, and you want to have other things to do. So we're going to turn this back on. The plate I'm just using on the starting speed. I want you to be able to see the visual on camera. So this one, I know one of the things that many of my moms and dads are dealing with is trying to get those heels on the ground. Okay. So maybe what you can do with a pull noodle, and if you're dealing with a little body, I recommend the one that's cut in half. For my bigger users, this one's okay. But wedge this under the front part of the foot. Put those heels on the ground. And if your child or if you personally are really, really tight, this might be a starting point for you. You might be feeling that stretch already. If you are able to stand, for those of you that are standing, wedging it under the front part of the feet and forcing those heels down on the plate, this is a really easy way. I wouldn't suggest maybe doing this for your whole routine, but you know, for a minute or two in one of your standing poses, this is a great way to just force those heels to the surface of the plate, and you'll feel a little bit of stretch in the calves if the spasticity is really, really bad. Another thing that you can do, we're going to switch to the big roller style now, is you can roll. So if you've got tightness throughout the foot and you just want, you know, something different to do, this isn't maybe the best visual for rolling, but you can roll your calves, you can roll your hamstrings, anything that you roll on the floor now, you can do on the plate just to take advantage of the stimulus that it's giving you and make that roll more effective. But again, I like using pull noodles. They're less dense. If you use a traditional physio pull noodle, they're going to bounce all over the place. The foam is just too dense. And what this does is it simply, you know, gets the stimulation into those nooks and crannies. You know, I like rolling my arms on it. I've thrown it on my neck. I've done all kinds of things. I want you to experiment. Today is all about giving you the confidence to experiment on your own. There is no perfect path to success with these machines. Everybody's different. So the next variation I want to show you is going to be a sit to stand exercise. So for those of you that are bearing weight, you're beginning to bear weight, one of the big things we want to focus on in this community is leg strength. And a lot of times there's imbalances in those strengths. You got a strong side, you got a weak side, you got, you know, the loose hips, you got all kinds of things that not only are not unilateral on both sides of the bodies, but there's a lot of deficiencies sometimes that we need to address before we can get to some of these functional exercises. So as much as we'd all love to be doing squats, it's not possible for everyone. The better starting point is a sit to stand. And if you're working with a therapist now, Hypervibe has this one on their app as well. A sit to stand is simply as it says. We're going to go from sitting to standing, and we're going to sit back down. This is a very universal exercise. This isn't specific to CP. I work with a lot of my clients on the senior end. A lot of you dealing with osteoporosis, Parkinson's. This is a very common exercise a lot of my therapists would do. And all you're doing is taking that same floor-based exercise and you're doing it on a vibration plate to make it more effective and a little more fun. Now, if stability is not there, again, you know, maybe you have a ladder attached to the wall, maybe you're at the edge of your kitchen counter. But if you are using a mobility aid, I want you to try and make sure that it's the legs you're using. You're not using your arm strength to pull you up. So use this for stability, but as much as you can, try using your leg strength. And you may need assistance with this. And you may be only able to do 1 rep. You might be able to do 10 reps. Somebody asked me about time earlier, and I'm going to address that now. How long and how often can I use a machine? I don't know. How long or how often are you allowed to go for a walk? How long or how often are you allowed to go to the gym and do a cardio class? It really depends on what you're doing on the plate and you personally. From a safety and efficacy standpoint, there's never really been a determination as to exposure limits, if you will. Anybody that's talking exposure limits or fear mongering around that, they're talking workplace, They're talking trucks, dump trucks, tampers, jackhammers. Industrial occupational vibration has nothing to do with vibration plates. And I will get into that briefly here in a minute. But it's a completely different thing, and I don't want to hear about it because it's misinformation, for lack of a better term. If I were to give you a guideline of total daily exposure, I hate giving a number, but half an hour is really more than sufficient if you're applying your machine properly. That being said, I'm going to be the first to admit I have a number of families that are using the plate for 2 to 3 hours a day. It really depends. I don't advise that for everyone, and extended use is generally associated with managing pain and chronic symptoms. If you're doing exercises on your plate, you're doing squats, you're doing push-ups, you're doing, things that your therapist has asked you to do, it shouldn't be a total time thing. It's going to be more a per exercise thing. So if you're doing just a seated exercise like this, probably 3 to 5 minutes is more than sufficient regardless of what you're doing, but feel free to do it a couple, 3 times a day. I want you using this machine for the soft stuff, the wellness piece. If you're using it just for, increases in circulation, or you're using it for a couple of minutes here and there, use it 10 times a day. But what I don't want you doing is 5-6 sessions of an hour each. You've got better things to do. And that's not really the premise of this machine, is to go longer and longer. It's supposed to reduce the amount of time that you spend doing exercises. So if it's therapeutic use, 30 seconds to a minute, maybe 2 minutes per exercise. If it's fitness and you're putting effort into it, you shouldn't last longer than a minute or two. And if you're lasting 10 minutes in a squat, you're not doing the squat. You're not squatting. There's no way that you should be able to do 10 minutes in a squat. You can stand there all day, but I prefer you get functional. So if you're doing an exercise and you're pushing yourself to your range of motion and your ability, you shouldn't last more than a minute or two. And if you're using a Galileo or a Hypervibe with those higher frequencies, you're going to fatigue even faster because your muscles are contracting more times per second. The slower you go, again, those are more about the balance and stability, but any exercise you do on this plate, the machine's going to make it a little bit more challenging. So make sure the posture's there, make sure you're breathing. And the biggest thing for your standing exercises, I want to stress for everybody, but this community in specific, is get those heels planted. Even if you have to stand up a little taller, it's not about being on the toes. That defeats the purpose. For the next little trick I want to add while I'm standing, little ball. Just a few of you deal with prolapse here. The ankles are falling inward, the knees are falling inwards, and many of you are talking to me about strengthening the hips and the inner thighs. Okay, my other big investment. This is a ball. Okay, there's other things you could, if you've got yoga rings, there's a couple different things that you can play with here. What I want you to do with this is, there's a little bit of air taken out of it, so it's not completely inflated. Place this just above the knees, between the thighs. And what it's going to do is it's going to force the inner and the outer leg muscles to hold it in place. It's going to help with those hip issues you might be having. But more importantly, is it's going to help with the prolapse. So it's going to stop the knees from collapsing inward, which is a big thing a lot of you talk to me about when you're standing. If you are able to stand, you can also put this between your legs to keep your legs in alignment. Now, the ball itself, I'm going to come closer so you can see this here, what I'm doing. If you're dealing with a littler body, you may need to use a littler ball. So this one is just a kid's playground ball, and you can see I've deflated a bit of the air under it. For me, this is perfect because my feet are in alignment with my hips. If you're dealing with a smaller body, you might need to use a smaller ball to bring those feet closer together. But this is probably, I always say this is probably the biggest tip I can give you, but there's a few. This is one of the bigger tips I can give you. And many of you, if you're dealing with your child, you have balls around the house anyways. So start putting this between their legs. They love it. They think it's a blast. And for your standing exercises, you're really going to notice a boost in the strength. So your device is part of it, but what you're doing on the machine is also part of how you improve in using it. So this is, like I say, this is a great little tool just to strengthen. And many of you have one laying around the house already. And you should be able to work through dynamic movements with it. It's not going to slip out of place. I think this is a really good tool for many of you to try. One more position I do want to show you very briefly. I know I've been showing a little bit of a squat, and the only thing that I will say with your squats, if you are starting for the first time, don't move. Hold your positions static. Most of us are not going to the gym and getting regular coaching on how to do a squat properly, so check out a video. But a basic squat is keeping our body in alignment. Our shoulders are in line with our heels, and it's like we're going to sit on a chair. You want the majority of the weight on your heels. If you're unable to do that, then maybe you need to work on stretching those areas or warming them up a bit first. The next exercise I want to show you, if you are an adult, will require range of motion. If you're dealing with a little, you can personally sit them on the plate, which is what we're going to do next. If you are dealing with a plate that's got a lumpy, bumpy surface, or it's not comfortable, you may want to put a mat or a towel. I like using pieces of yoga mats. I feel as an almost 50-year-old woman, I have enough padding built in, and many of my moms will agree with me. So again, this is a tolerance thing. But if you're working with a child, I recommend matting it, putting a mat on. They tend to be littler. How their body absorbs the vibration is a little different. It feels different to all of us. And the goal with this exercise, you'll notice my legs are straight. I don't know if you can see me on camera here. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Okay. So my legs are straight. Regardless of what plate you're using, I recommend sitting with the buttons in front of you versus behind if you're doing this. A lot of times you get into it and your bum hits the buttons and you speed it up or slow it down. This way you can play with the buttons. And really the goal here is legs straight. If the legs are so tight that you have to put the feet on the plate, absolutely make sure that you've got padding. But really the goal is to get the hamstrings on the plate. So you may need to work on a couple of exercises to loosen up before you try this. But we want the legs flat, and this is simply another way to get into the hamstrings, to loosen them. For my moms and dads that are spending, like I said earlier, 20 minutes to a half an hour massaging legs to get them straight so you can sleep at night, I'd really love for your child to have a night where they can sleep without their braces on, with their legs straight. And many of you are experiencing that. And, sitting on the plate there's a couple things going on. Primarily, I want you to do it because it gets into the hamstrings. It's nice on the low back and the hips. But many of you are dealing with constipation because you sit too much or you're in your wheelchair. And this is one of the number one reasons your child will have better bowel movements. Is a vibration plate. There is a study out there, but anybody who's used a plate for some time and has had constipation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It gets things moving. It moves your lymph. It moves your circulation. So logically, other things get moving. So the number one reason I like to sit my littles on the plate if they're constipated, for sure, but you're also getting the hamstrings at the same time. So it's kind of a 2-in-1. If you want to be a little more aggressive, you could certainly turn this into more of a stretch, or you as a parent could lift the leg, or the therapist. Again, all we're doing is placing the larger part of the hamstrings and the bottom of the glutes on the plate directly. This is just a passive way to do, it's kind of like doing a toe touch, but you're sitting on it, if you will. And again, most of you are dealing with spasticity in the hamstrings, so I'm kind of focusing on that one area today. How long would you do something like this? A minute, maybe 2 minutes per position. Again, back to the time thing. It's not a total time thing. It really depends on how many exercises you're doing, okay? This one, some of my families do 2-3 times a day. They do it first thing in the morning. Definitely, this is a great one to use before you go to bed at night. And depending on your range of motion and your imagination, you can massage anywhere. You can massage the quads, you can massage the outer hips, you can massage the low back, you can do the inner thighs. You're only limited by your imagination and your range of motion. I always say that. And again, This isn't necessarily an exercise position. One of the bonuses of a vibration plate is you can do your exercises, you can do your stretches, but the massage feature, I'm really hoping is going to give a lot of you families back some more family time and less massaging and therapy time, if you will. A couple of other things I want to briefly talk on before we get into some questions, because our group has evolved a little beyond vibration plates. So there's lots of other vibrational tools out there. I recommend to many of you, and some of you I know in this group are already using massage guns. If you're in Dr. Park's group, he recommends massage guns as well. Is a massage gun better than a vibration plate? It's not a better, it's a different thing. So if someone asks me if there's only one thing that you can have in your arsenal and one thing that you can use, it's going to be the vibration plate. Why? Because you've got the benefits of what comes with exercise, with weight-bearing activity. You can increase the bones, you can increase the strength, but you can also use it for relaxation and therapeutic use. A vibration gun or a roller, I have so many toys behind camera, you have no idea. These are going to be a little bit more localized. So, you know, you're trying to spot treat a target area. You know, maybe you've got tension building up throughout the day and you don't have access to your vibration plate. There's a bazillion things available for sale. Again, they do not need to be medical grade. You can spend $700-800 on a massage gun, but you can also get a very decent quality one for about $100 to $150. But what I'm going to say very briefly with these are going to be good. You know, maybe you use them as a warm up before you're using your vibration plate. Maybe you're using it on your vibration plate, but vibration has a way in this community of providing relief in a lot of different ways. The guns and the rollers aren't going to make you stronger. They're not going to make you lose weight, but from a managing symptoms perspective, a lot of you are using guns. And they're a good go-to if you're in a surgery situation and you have to take some time off your exercises or your plate. They're a really good way, again, to save you, mom and dad, or you, the therapist or trainer, those manual tools, your hands. And I will say for a lot of my older therapists, just hanging on to a massage gun or a roller ball is going to improve your grip strength. It's going to alleviate arthritis in the hands. So, you know, even though we're here talking today about caring for those with CP, for those of you that are caring for them, I want to keep you healthy and strong and able, because you got to take care of them. You got to make sure they're doing their vibration plate. So I just wanted to briefly mention, if you're using rollers, if you're using guns, you know, I do have relationships with a number of different companies. But when it comes to vibration plates, there are some differences. When it comes to massage guns, the specs are very, very similar in the actual frequencies that they put out. A massage gun also has an amplitude and a frequency. So the amplitude on a massage gun is going to vary anywhere from probably, I don't know, 9 millimeters to 15. And all that means is how much the gun is moving in and out each time. Okay. So since I've already got this turned on, I may as well just very quickly, if you are looking at using a massage gun, the best tip that I can give you is let the gun do the work. You don't need to press and push. Crank, just like the vibration machine, crank it up to a mid to high speed. And instead of you physically, we have this mentality that we have to apply pressure because that's what massage is to us. But what I want you to do is just skim. You see how it's just skimming the surface of my skin? Whereas if I'm pushing into it, my hand's going all, just skim the surface. Get used to how it feels. And I think you'll find a higher speed with less pressure is going to be just as effective and much, much more comfortable than a slow speed where you're trying to drill this thing into your hamstrings or your hips or whatever is bothering you. And for my therapists and my trainers out there that are spending a lot of time doing manual applications, while you're sitting there doing your emails, just hang on to one of these things. Give your hands some relief. Or if you've got a vibration plate, sit on your hands on the plate. That's another one I've shown a lot of my families. I should show you guys that one. while you're sitting, take your hands and tuck them under your bum. It's a really good way to get some upper body movement in the neck and the shoulders if it's just for tension. But a lot of you, a traditional push-up on the wrists can sometimes be a little bit challenging. This is a really good way, just by sitting your hands under your butt, palms down, to get some movement into the upper body, some lymph and circulation going. Really depends on what's going on with you. I have this cerebral palsy group that I manage, but I also have a very large fat disorders group, which involves conditions like lymphedema, lipedema, Derkham's disease, where moving lymph is very, very essential. And that's a very popular one for them to kind of get total body relief. But it's also the constipation piece that I like to teach you that one, as you know. Okay. So how long, how often? I want to talk about that a little bit more for those of you that might just be joining me. I can't give you a definitive answer. If you're working with a therapist and they've outlined some protocols, you know, that might be a better place to start. But if you're just winging this on your own, like many of you are, I'm going to use a term today, and it's one you've heard before. I'm going to tell you to start conservatively. Most companies, if you're calling where you bought the machine, they're going to say, well, just start slow. And right away, we associate that with like a speed. So I've talked about the speeds. The slow speeds are really choppy and they're really wobbly and they're that Bosu ball. And when you're ready for them, that's fine. But I would suggest conservative over, if you're talking to other people too, conservative to me means less time, using it more often, getting assimilated to it before we start busting a move and getting into a whole bunch of exotic exercises. So if you're starting on your plate, starting conservatively to me is with a slow speed, with a moderate foot position. And if somebody, please just make sure that you guys are mute for now. I'm getting some background noise here. Nikki, I think your mic has turned off, if you don't mind. There. Sounds like she's got her little there with her. Okay. And I know there's a lot of info I'm covering today. I do plan to do more of these, but the biggest goal again today was, if you're not using your plate or if you're scared of your plate, no more. Today is about understanding it's a different experience for everybody. There's no good or bad plates. There's no best plate. There's no best exercise. There's no best setting. A machine is simply an environment that makes what you're supposed to be doing, and I'm going to stress that, easier. So starting conservatively means 3 to 5 minutes. Play around with it a little bit. Try it a couple times today, you know, maybe a little bit in the morning, maybe a little bit at night to get some relief in the body before you try going to sleep. If you don't have a structured routine now, through a therapist, through a doctor, and you're looking for a protocol to work with your child or for yourself, I am not here to provide that for you. I can certainly provide some basic exercises. But if you're looking for more of a one-on-one coaching scenario with me, I'm going to show you some basic stuff, but it's more about translating and showing you how to do the exercises that you're doing now, floor-based or on your bed or on a massage table on the machine. Okay. So for my therapists out there, my trainers, in my opinion, there's really never anyone that can't use a machine without modifications. And that even means the day after surgery. So I'll give you an example of, I don't know if Dr. Park is here today, but I remember our first call. And, you know, a lot of you have asked me, how quickly after SDR can we have surgery? And it used to be 4 months, and it used to be, but it's been revised to 2 months. And part of that is pushing back with me. If you've been using a plate regularly and you find yourself in a surgery situation, and then after surgery, you want to use your plate. You understand how it makes you feel. You're not scared of it. Whereas if you're someone that's never used the plate before, and now you have a surgery and you want to use this as part of your therapy, you haven't gone through all the newbie stuff. You don't really understand what it is yet. So the fear is kind of even more prominent. And if you've been to St. Louis for surgery, the first thing that Dr. Park's recommending, and Deanna, is you should be using a vibration plate. But if you've never used one, it's scary. This is your little kid, or it's, you know, this is your life, and you've just spent a lot of money on that too. So there's a lot of different plates. There's a lot of ways to get started. And as I showed you, typically for standing exercises, it's 2 months post SDR. But You could sit on a stool and put the lower legs on the machine. What I don't want you doing is exposing the area of surgery before it's ready, or the area of injury. So if you are looking at using a plate in preparation for or post-surgery, again, you should have qualified guidance. But if you have been using a plate prior to the surgery, there's a lot of reasons you could after the fact. I just recommend either getting some suggestions from your therapist, booking a call with me, looking at some of the information on this page, and just apply common sense. You know, keep that body part away from the machine if you've just had surgery on it. The last little piece I'm going to ramble on before I'm going to let you blast me is if there are any therapists or trainers or experienced, I don't care if you've got initials. This device is about experience. And the more you get on it and the more you play with it, the more you're going to learn. I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. For those of you that know me, I got into this with a bad knee about 20 years ago and I had a really big butt and I needed to lose weight. And I couldn't do a treadmill. I couldn't do the things I was supposed to do to lose the weight. I fell across a $15,000 vibration machine. It's all they had back in the day. And it was a vertical. And I remember I did a squat on this thing and I thought, oh, my knee is going to kill me the next day. But surprisingly, after about a 5-10 minute workout, it was fine. And what I mean by workout is I did a couple squats, I did a couple lunges, I did a couple things I knew that would normally aggravate my knee to see, you know, I guess I wanted to prove it wrong. And, you know, not only did my knee not hurt the next day, it actually felt a little better. I usually have a little swelling on it when I get up in the morning and that wasn't present. So it kind of prompted me into my discovery. I opened a studio. You know, my path was I got into the biggest, baddest vibration machines before there was websites, before there was support, before there was even places to talk about it. And after 15 years of using these devices on every kind of body you can imagine, you know, I've over-exercised a few people and they've been a little sore the next day, but I've never had any ill effects. So you as parents, no one knows your child better than you. Not your therapist, not your doctor. You know your kid. You know what motivates them. You know what they respond to. And what I can tell you, the biggest win when I started working with pediatrics through the Children's Hospital here in Calgary was these plates. These kids love the plates. They're fun. They make funny voice sounds. And kids tend to have better tolerance than us. We don't have society in our brain telling us to be afraid of it and that we need permission. Kids kind of, you know, naturally gravitate to these machines. And the only fear that tends to get into their brain is when we place it there or when we don't explain things that they're feeling. So the reason I want you guys, I'm going to stress again, if you're considering this for your child or your patients, you're going to be so much more effective as a coach if you're using it yourself, even just on a basic level. You're going to understand that there's an itchiness, there's a pins and a needles thing when you first start. And if you're not explaining this to your child, they don't know what's going on. I've had people call me and freak out thinking it's an allergic reaction. It's just an increase in circulation and lymph. And I will tell you that I've had a number of times where people have their feet on the plate and they're feeling them for the first time in 5-10 years. It's not a bad thing, but it's shocking if you're not expecting it. So there's all kinds of miracles I have the privilege of witnessing every day with these plates. I had not 1 ounce of experience when I got into this 15 years ago. And here I am today preaching to all of you how to use them. So don't be scared. The more you use them, the more experience you're going to get, the more you're going to figure out what you like. It's just an environment, regardless of what plate that you're using. So I think that's it. I want to ask any trainers or therapists out there, again, if you do have experience, I placed a post in the group yesterday inviting you, if you would like me to put you in touch with families. I'm not expecting you to donate your time for free, but I do have a lot of families that would benefit from more structured guidance. And if you can offer it, I'm going to make a resource in this group of therapists and where they're located. Ideally, I would love to align you with therapists or even personal trainers in your area. For those of you that are working with these machines or wanting to start working with these machines, maybe you just want to try a session first, or go talk with someone and know that you've got someone to give guidance. And I know there's many of you in this group that are out there. I don't care what brand you're working with. I don't care what experience you have. If you've got a vibration plate in your facility and you're working with one now, I want to share my experience with you. I'll send you some information, but I want to send families to you. So when families come to me and say, well, what therapists are in London or what therapists are in Sydney, I can say, well, this is who I'm aware of. You know, I've got a few out there that I recommend, and I don't want anyone thinking I'm biased, but I am biased. I'm going to recommend people who I know and based on my relationship with them. So I've got a couple of really good therapists in the UK that I work with. I've got a few in Australia. I've got a number in Canada and the US, but I want to know where you guys are at and align you with people that are looking for support on this technology. So as I said, I did a post in the group yesterday. If you're a therapist, we want to hear from you. Please make a comment. If you're not comfortable making a comment, send me a personal message. I just want to get a list started of people, what gear you have, and how people can get in touch with you to explore further. Now, there's about 10,000 typed messages here. I did post a document earlier on that I will get posted up in the group because it doesn't seem to be coming up. So I will send that for those of you looking. Hi, Debbie. Is there a maximum amount of time? I want to get back to you, Emily. I see a sensory seeking 2-year-old CP, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so first of all, Emily, it depends what you're doing on it. So most of my therapists aren't doing everything on it. But if you're doing a single exercise, you know, you're probably looking maybe a minute to 2 per exercise. So it really depends on how many you're doing. If you're just using it as a pre or a post treatment, for my therapists out there, the best way that you can incorporate a vibration machine or vibration gun or ball is to use it as a prep before or after whatever else you're doing. It's going to accelerate the effects of the therapy that you're doing. It may reduce the amount of time you have to spend doing that therapy, but I absolutely recommend a couple 3 minutes before or after your other therapies just to enhance the effects of both. And I think you're going to see the difference very, very quickly. I hope that helps. He's using his plate daily. I haven't found how much information about Safe Max. You know, again, I'm going to say, you know, I don't want to put anyone in harm's way, but I have families using these for 2 to 3 hours a day just to get rid of spasticity. They're not doing squats. They're not doing push-ups. They're not seeing any ill effects, but I don't want, you know, these are supposed to be a 10-minute miracle machine, you know, 3 to 4 times a week. So I would say use it often to manage symptoms that from a lifestyle perspective. But for your exercises, if you're pushing for fatigue and you're doing exercises, probably in every other day situation, kind of like the gym, you wouldn't work out every single day. But for the feel good, the massage, wellness, you know, every single day, a couple times a day, try to keep it within 30 minutes if I had to give you a number. Christina, so much useful information. Thank you. Is this recorded? Yes, it will be recorded because your head is going to be so spinning by the time you're done listening to me for an hour. I know. I can't download it all into a zip drive. Otherwise, I would. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of stuff I forgot. So what I want you to do, for those of you that are joining now and those of you that are watching later, if you think of something after the fact, it's going to take me about a day to get this downloaded from Zoom and processed. Tag me and make a comment. So if there's something you think about after the fact, or you forgot to ask, or you didn't get a chance to join the live, tag me, and we're going to keep this going for a couple of days with just questions and answers so everybody can see. Initials don't give us common sense. I'm living proof. Thank you for saying that, Christina. I don't always have common sense, but I do like to say common sense applies. But I do understand fear sometimes gets in the way and misinformation. So you got one company telling you this, you got, you know, this guy online saying that, you know, there's never a perfect path, you know. So someone asked me earlier again about time, you know, when a therapist, well, how long, you know, should I be using this in a day? And a lot of my therapists, I'm sorry if I sound cheeky, but I always say, well, how long are they allowed to go for a walk? It really depends. If that walk is uphill and you're running, you probably wouldn't do that every day, but you might, you know, how many times do you walk to the refrigerator? How many times do you walk to the bathroom? You know, if you're just using it for a minute or two to improve your balance and feel better, use it every hour if you want. But if you're pushing yourself, you're doing exercises, there's going to be some parameters. Thank you for a great session. I have to run, no problem. I'm sure many of you I'm putting to sleep at this point. Hopefully I will email you with a couple of questions. My main one right now is what makes anyone qualified for whole body vibration? I'm a physio. And I have hypervibe plate and I would be around. Okay, interesting. You must have the G17 if you're talking about a heavy beast. What makes someone qualified? You know, I can pose that question to myself. I don't have education in an institution because most institutions, don't even acknowledge what whole body vibration is, let alone offer accredited training for it. My background comes from experience, and I have been very, very blessed to work with some amazing therapists like Dr. Park. You know, there's many of them out there. In my lipedema group, my fat disorders group, lipedema just got a standard of care code so I'm talking to doctors about a condition they've never heard of and using a device to treat it that they've never heard of. So that it's hard to say what gets you qualified, but if you're working with a hypervibe, there is guidance and support that they can offer you. Same with Galileo. When you're getting those medical grade devices, there's a lot of training and guidance you can get. But for the consumer grade machines, for everything else out there, there's really nowhere that you can go to school per se. You know, I'm gonna lean on my tenure. You know, I'm an expert and any type of plate out there. Why? Because I've been taking them apart and putting them together for 15 years. I've serviced most of them. So I'm kind of an anomaly in my own craft just because I've been stubborn for 15 years and stuck with it. But I was also very fortunate to work with the best equipment early on. So I am versed in both vertical and pivotal machines. And I would say if you want to get into these machines, you're not doing yourself a service or your clients unless you understand both. In a perfect world, every physio office would have a top of the line oscillating plate, a top of the line lineal, because it does get down to personal preference. I honestly believe in the long run, if performance is equivalent, I think the benefits are the same. I really, really do. But most people don't have the benefit of 15, 20 years with clients like I do. But what I can tell you again, from a preference standpoint, 99 out of 100 people prefer oscillating. It's just more comfortable. It's how we walk. It's, you know, so from there, it boils down to, are you investing and looking at those medical grade qualities, or are you looking at consumer grade? And if have both. Not everybody's going to be able to afford to take a hypervibe or a Galileo home, and they want to know what alternatives are out there. I do recommend a couple of brands in the consumer world. Am I biased? Yeah, I'm biased. And why am I biased? Because they have better warranties. They're more accessible. If you're looking at a consumer grade machine, I've mentioned a few brands here today, but the biggest thing you can make sure is that there's actually a company behind them. So with Galileo and hypervibe, they're vibration plate companies. You can go to their website, you can contact a person. But if you're looking on eBay or Amazon, a lot of times you're dealing with a factory direct machine. And if something does go wrong, there's probably not a person to deal with. You're going to be going through Amazon, and that's not ideal. And there's certainly not going to be any coaching and support. They're just selling a machine. There's hundreds of brands out there. The reason I recommend the brands that I do recommend, one of them employs me to do training videos. So guess what? They offer training and support. And some of them have better warranties. But the main reason I recommend the few brands that I do recommend, I wish there was one brand that was available everywhere, but there's not. So that's why I recommend a few depending on where you're at. I recommend them because there's a company behind them. So even if you're buying them on eBay or Amazon, there's other ways that you can get in touch with these companies and hold them accountable if you're having an issue. So that the few brands that I do recommend, and I will make some recommendations tomorrow when I put the bigger post up, but Galileo and hypervibe, they have access to support. They have access to therapists. If you own their plates, they're a company that you can reach out to. If you're dealing with other devices and you're looking to go less expensive, that's okay. But sometimes when you're going with the cheapest machine, you don't have anyone to deal with. So even if you're only spending $50 to $100, for some people, that's an entire month's savings, or that's a week's worth of groceries. So if you're looking at investing in these plates, make sure that there's a company you can talk to behind the scenes. You're not just dealing with some manufacturer who's selling it mass through eBay or Amazon. That's same with the guns. You can get guns cheap, but if you spend, 20, 30 bucks more, you'll probably get a company you can speak to if you do have any problems. And I'm going to mention a few of those companies in my comments later on. I hope that answered your question. I got on a bit of a tangent there. I've just dragged our Hypervibe out of storage for my 8-year-old with CP, and we are in the UK. Thank you for this. Lydia, that's awesome. And you've got a Hypervibe. So the big thing is fear, or sometimes you get bored doing the same thing all the time. There's a video, and if you haven't seen the resources in this group, at the top of the group, I've got something called the features items. And I feel like a nag sometimes. I'm always saying, please review featured items. I'm saying that for a reason. There's a little video there that I did in English, Spanish, and French, I believe, for those of you that have poor mobility, because usually you're the ones looking for the most help. For those of you that are able to weight bear, you tend to be a little bit more adventurous, a little bit more confident because you're doing exercises now. Again, this is just an environment. Any of those exercises you're doing on the floor can be done on your plate. And if you've got a machine in storage, pull it out, put it beside the sofa. If you haven't taken it out of the biggest tragedy is never experiencing what you might have gained. So I hope I've given you at least a little kick in the butt today. And if you are fearful, reach out to us. That's what this group is for. What I want this group to be is populated with posts of what you're doing and how it was great for you. I don't want this page to be populated with posts of, you shouldn't do that with your child and you can't use that machine. Why not? More of you are having success in using these machines, never having met me or any instructor in your life. You know your kids. You know what they're capable of. Just get rid of the fear and start playing with this great tool that you may already have. And I would recommend, Lydia, if you want some help in the area, Sammy, I don't know if you're here with us, and I'm bringing Sammy's name up simply because she's one of the few that has reached out and made an effort to get to know me and this page. Sammy's got Hypervibe and Galileo. She is a therapist and she's got a lot of experience with pediatrics. So if you're in the UK area, I don't know if she's in Strathshire. I don't know physically where in the UK, but she's one that I often recommend because I just don't know who everybody else is out there. In the UK, if you're dealing with Galileo, they would recommend Vicky. Vicky, I don't know if you're here as well. There's lots of other therapists, but those are the two that have contributed to this page. So I'm contributing to them. If you're involved, I'm going to recommend you. Have you seen insurance companies cover these? Yes, I have. But again, it's black and white. No, sorry, it's not. A vibration machine doesn't exist in the world of billing codes. So if you phone up your insurance company and say, hey, I want to buy a vibration plate, you're probably going to get a bunch of laughter on the other end. And they're going to say, oh, is it that thing on the home shopping channel? There's a stigma, even with your insurance company. They think these things are like these jiggly machines from the 50s. So this is another reason you may want to talk to a therapist or a doctor. So there's two different types of codes. There's the code that you, the therapist, uses to bill for the service. Lots of those codes out there. But there's also the code that you, the parent, may want to tap into to offset purchase. So unfortunately, that is driven by the benefit plan that you have. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. It's not a universal thing. But look at your vibration plate is no different than a treadmill or an elliptical or a yoga machine, a transform. There's all kinds of home care aids. You need to get creative, but maybe it's a balance tool. Maybe it's a balance trainer. Get creative with what you're calling it. Don't call it a vibration machine. I hope that makes sense. So, and what would really, really, really help is if you had a prescription, a letter of something from your therapist recommending that you use this for in-home exercise, in-home therapy, whatever you want to call it. That will really help your insurance company navigate, why do you need this machine? Well, my therapist wants me to use it at home to improve my child's balance. It's not a vibration machine. It's a balance trainer. Do you know what I mean? So kind of get creative that way. I'm saying that to my therapists out there. What about contractor behind my knee? My son has surgery on his knee and we are working on full range now. Could a massage gun help? Yeah, that's a perfect example of how a massage gun it's more of a specific area, or you're trying to target something. But if you have a vibration plate, this is another way you can target it. So you can place, like you're doing a calf massage, but wedge that full noodle under the back of the knees, lift the legs up a little bit if you can, roll the legs around. But that's a really good way when you're laying your legs on the machine, the back of the knee doesn't necessarily rest flat. So a pull noodle is a really good way to do it. Rollers, massage gun. And again, if you didn't see my tip earlier, please rewatch this. But just like a vibration machine, if you're using a roller or a gun, bring it up to like a mid or a higher speed and let it just skim the surface. Don't apply a lot of pressure. If the tension's really bad, you might even want to kind of warm up the back of the knee and before you and get a little bit deeper as it loosens up. But it really depends on the sensitivity. If there's any pain or swelling, you want to be really gentle in those areas. Make sure you're not nailing any of the tendons. And most massage guns come with different types of heads. So experiment, if you're doing the back of the knee, something like this, the round edge is probably or the round tip is probably going to be more comfortable than, something with a little fork or the flat ones. Depends on the body part that you're trying to target. But the back of the knee, a round ball, something a little softer is a good tip. Or try using a roller on your vibration plate if you have that as well. Thank you for raising that. Again, you're only limited by your imagination and your range of motion. Thanks for the comment about constipation, because my grandson with CP has this. I can apply this now. I'm also a retired massage therapist and agree about self-care using this. Thank you for saying that. I got to say, for all of the therapists I've worked with over the years and neurosurgeons, and I've been blessed. But I will say my massage therapists get this more than anybody. And it's probably the number one business I've installed vibration machine. The very, very first business I ever installed a vibration machine in was a massage therapy office. And it wasn't for her patients. It was her. She was well into her 90s, and her back and her hands. And she just wanted it to keep herself limber and loose so she could keep working on her patients. So again, in a business, it's for you, the caregiver, but it's also for your patients. So I appreciate that. And it's a no-brainer, as far as the exercises and what to physically do on it. That's usually where more of you struggle. But I assure you, if you just start playing with this thing and take some of the tips that I started with the amplitude beginning, you're going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to start feeling a lot better pretty soon too. Hi, my daughter has SDR, possibly the use of the hyper vibration machine. Yes, Dr. Park recommends the use of a vibration plate. Hypervibe is one of the brands that he recommends, and they have both a Galileo and a Hypervibe at St. Louis. They used to have another machine as well. But if you've just had SDR, the standard guideline is 2 months post-op. And Hypervibe, if you are considering with them, they've got an app where you can physically go in. There's some suggested exercises I helped contribute to a couple years ago for SDR. Depending on your child, it's a good starting point. Some of you have commented to me that it's a little too conservative. Keep in mind, I always am conservative because I don't know what I'm dealing with on the other end of the screen. So everything's always very conservative. Many of you are dealing with poor mobility, lacking weight-bearing ability. So if you're able to do more, again, progress into some of the other programs. You don't have to stick with the SDR program in that app, or talk to your therapist for some guidance. I missed out on the first few minutes, but did you do upper body or shoulder recommendations? No, I did not specifically. I'm trying to get into generalities of a modified push-up where you're on your hands and your knees would be a great way to start. I did recommend sitting on your hands as one visual, but there's one that I did forget to do. So I'm going to go back to the machine and just offer that to you now. I am going to use my bar stool. For those of you that are stuck weight bearing for a period of time, or that's the majority of how you spend your time, you can get some upper body movement by adding the elbows or your hands simply to your knees. So by putting your hands on your knees and locking those arms, You're going to feel movement in the upper body. It's not as aggressive as putting the elbows on. I prefer the elbows. So if you lean over and get a little bit, lean into it, you're going to feel it in the neck and the shoulders. This is a really good way to just start loosening up tension, especially for my caregivers out there. You'll love this one. But I think more what you're looking for would look like this. So you're wondering about like a starting push-up, okay? So a modified push-up is where you're on your knees and we're not bearing a whole lot of weight. And just like when you're standing on the machine, you are always in control. How close or how far apart your hands are determines the amount of movement. So we can do this position like this. This is kind of like a little cat-cow from yoga, if you know what I mean. The trick with upper body, especially with my little kids, is the head shape, the head vibe. And the trick is with this one, if you're looking down at your hands, you're getting the most head vibration. I want you to push your body slightly forward till the shoulders are over the hands, and you'll feel the vibration leaves the head and it's now in the neck and the shoulders. So instead of here, just leaning into that position and getting the hands in line with the shoulders is going to give you more access. If it's too intense, bring the hands closer to start. And if these are, I think, you know, you could also, one thing I love to do with the pool noodles, because many of you have troubles getting those hands straight. Maybe you need to use the pool noodle to start to give them something to hang on to. A couple of variations I've shown you. But if you have trouble with the hands and you're not able to get them flat, give them a pool noodle or roll up a towel or something to give them to hang on to, because sometimes it's hard to get the hands and the angles of the wrists starting out. So that's just a little tip there. I hope that helped. Okay. Any contraindications for children with a history of seizures? Yes, there is, Emily. You know what? Most of you are dealing with crow issues here, and epilepsy is not an uncommon one. It used to be a contraindication because the world was idiots and they didn't know better. It's not a contraindication if you have epilepsy at all. In fact, in my experience, it's probably going to a degree, be a really good environment for you to train in. What I would caution you with epilepsy is understanding what your triggers are. It's usually not, you know, if over exercise is one of them. I have never in my time experienced a seizure on the machine other than when I was trying to induce one. And even then I couldn't. The experience I have had with seizures on the plate has been 3 of them in this group. And part of the reason I give caution if you are dealing with epilepsy is that those 3 incidences have all occurred in higher frequency ranges. They've always been in excess of 20 hertz. I am not going to get into why it happened or how it happened, because I know my manufacturers associated with this will disagree with me. But in my opinion, the reason those things happened is a little bit on the overexercise side. So if you are using a capable machine, if you're using a Galileo and you're using a Hypervibe and you do have epilepsy, you know, I don't want you over-exercising your child. This isn't something, another half hour you're to be doing on top of everything else you're doing. The goal of a vibration plate is to take those exercises you're supposed to be doing and making them more effective. So a couple of times the experience I had was over-exercise. Absolutely, in my opinion, it was. Another instance there, the E-stim was involved. So I haven't really confirmed whether it was the E-stim, whether it was the vibration plate, whether it was a combination. I'm just being transparent. In 15 years and thousands of children, I've had 3 examples I've been very personally involved in. But other than that, and I don't think they were related to the vibration plate. I think they were related to overexercise. But again, I'm not a therapist. I wasn't dealing with these families directly. I did have conversations with them, and everything is fine since. But if you're fearful, Emily, or you're dealing with that as a therapist, there's no reason to be concerned unless exercise or over-exercising is a trigger for those seizures. then I want you to just be cautious with your fatigue levels. Be conservative, okay? I see fatigue is the root of seizure and not whole body vibration itself necessarily. I didn't even see that you did that. So yeah, in my experience, and I can only speak from a place of experience, guys. I'm not Galileo doing research in Germany. You know, I'm not Power Plate doing research, but here's my last little point that I want to talk about on research. There's so much anecdotal evidence out there. There are so many people, even within this group, using these plates, and they didn't have guidance. They didn't have a Galileo or a Hypervibe. And you know what? They're still seeing amazing, amazing benefits. So there's all kinds of machines for sale on the market. This is $100 version I got yesterday. Like, oh, it's so heavy, I could pick it up by the handles. I've also got a Hypervibe G14, an old model here. I've got a 4D model here. I've got about 17 other vibration machines behind. And what I want to tell you is if you're not getting into vibration therapy because you think you can't afford it, get what you can afford and start. The parameters I would give you is make sure it's an oscillating plate. In my opinion, for this community, that is going to give you the most benefit, especially on the balance and the stability piece. And you're also going to be able to get into an oscillating plate for a lot less money than vertical. Verticals they're great devices. I love my vertical machines, but they're becoming almost less and less in the market. There's less players. I think it has to do with sensitivities. I don't think they're as comfortable as their pivotal counterparts. They tend to be more expensive to get into something of quality. If you're not spending $4,000 or $5,000 on a vertical platform, you're not really getting a vertical platform. There are other types of movement out there. Pulsation is one that some of my Life Pro machines offer. It's a nice stimulus if you're dealing with things like neuropathy or you want something very, very mild. Lateral is another movement, as I said, and what the spiral and the 3Ds and the 4Ds, they're just combinations of those movements. And because there's so many variables available, there's never going to be research to validate every frequency, it's never going to happen. There's too many variables. And this is where you as caregivers, you as families are using whatever, more people have a machine that has been gifted to them or they got used off marketplace than I think people that have bought new. So, why be picky if somebody gave you a free machine or you got a good deal? What I want you to do is whatever you have, use it. And once you use it and understand how it feels, if you have questions, that's what this group is for. But if you have input on the choice, I want you selecting something that's got an oscillating option. It's going to give you the most benefit for the purposes we've discussed today. These are all oscillating movements. This one's about $100. That one's about $300. The G14 back in its day was about I think it was about a $2,000 machine. This is their original model. I don't have the one with the tower. I've also got a G17 in the back corner. So I love vibration technology, and not everybody's as into this as I am, but I can assure you my experience and my guidance is not universal to one brand, one type of movement. I'm here to kind of support whatever it is that you have. If I have input in your selection, I would prefer it be an oscillating style platform. If money is no object or you've got funding, that there are better performing plates in the Galileos and the Hypervibes, but sometimes it's a situation where you've got the money, but you want to use it in your motorhome or you're planning on using it under your wheelchair. So sometimes the reason I recommend a less expensive plate is because it's lighter and you want to be moving it around all the time. It really depends on what you personally are using the plate for. Some of you have two machines for that reason. You've got your Hypervibe or your Galileo, and then you've got a little one for traveling and things like that. I had a family this week coming from the UK going to see Dr. Park, and they're so concerned that they're not going to be using their vibration plate. I wish we could have a vibration plate in all the places you guys stay when you go to St. Louis, but there is Galileo and Hypervibe, as I mentioned, at St. Louis, and they've requested to do a session. After you get off a long plane ride, I'd love for you to get on a machine and loosen up before you do surgery. So there's all kinds of ways that you can feel better. You know, even if you're starting with a lesser plate, you are going to see improvements. You're going to see lots of improvements. And really, regardless of what machine you're using, the benefits come from consistently using the darn thing. So if you have a machine in the closet, pull it out. If you've been considering one, but budget is limited, shop within your budget. The real key is to get started and be consistent with it. And you'll know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to stop. I don't know if I have any more questions here. I think I have covered all of them in the comments section. But what I would like to do very briefly, if any of you here, I think there's quite a few of you. I'm not sure if you're all showing on my screen, but if anyone would like to ask me a question or has something they'd like to share, I would give you the floor at this point. So if you do have something you'd like to add or a question, please unmute yourself and I'm going to give you the floor. Everybody's quiet now. I've talked you all to sleep with all my ramblings is what's happened. Perhaps not. If there's no question, there doesn't have to be questions. If you think of perhaps, like I said, if you're going through this and my talking has got your brain spinning, perhaps you want to ask me a question after the fact. I will get this live posted in the form of a recording by tomorrow morning. As I said, it takes me about a day to process this. And if you here who have joined me live or anyone watching the recorded version has a question, please tag me in the group. I am Debby with a Y. I had a lady the other day that was upset I didn't see her tag, but you got to spell my name right to tag it properly. I'm Debby with a Y. So if you do want to ask me a question, if you have a question about your machine, this is your chance. Feel free to make a comment. Once I get the recording up, and I will get back to you within a reasonable time frame. If no one has questions for me, I want to thank every single one of you for listening to me. You should all get a medal for listening to me for an hour and 40 minutes. If anything today, I hope you learned 2 lessons. What amplitude is, you're always in control. Bring those feet closer or wider to change it. The second lesson is no fear. You are only limited by your imagination and your range of motion. And the worst you're going to do is over-exercise yourself a little bit. And you know the great thing about vibration machines is they're amazing in their recovery capacity. So everything you've ever heard about a vibration machine from a benefit standpoint is probably true. I don't care if it's bone density, if it's neuropathy, if it's brainal improvement or brainal improvement. I've been talking neurological improvements. I've seen it all 10 times over because I've been doing it for 15 years. But you're only going to realize those benefits if you step up to the plate and get started with whatever it is that you have today. I want to empower you. I don't want you all feeling like you need to book an appointment with me. I do offer appointments. If you really do want to do a one-on-one with me, I prefer to do it with the caregiver, not the child. It makes the most of our time, and it's kind of my way of getting you to try it because that's what I'd like you to do. But you should. Then you understand how it feels and you can translate to whoever you're caring for. But the goal of today's video was to get you the confidence to start playing. I'm not the type of trainer that I want to take your money every week and teach you this much so you have to keep coming back and see me. I'm staying involved in this page to give you a resource and a community for you to feel safe and exchange ideas in. I will not allow machine bashing or negativity or fear mongering. I had a question the other day in my group about, I heard that these machines liquefy kidneys. And I just about died. They don't liquefy anything, but that tells me right away somebody out there is truck and trash trying to sell something else. And sure enough, it was a liposuction machine. So, if there's something really horrible out there that you've heard or read or experienced personally, please reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. But I encourage you, if you're using a plate now, you don't need to be an expert. Share those videos, share pictures, share with other families. We're just looking for ideas and a safe place to share those ideas so everybody can improve using these devices. Regardless of what type of machine you're using, there's benefit to be had. So thank you all for joining me. I will probably look at doing this again in maybe a month or two, but it is World Cerebral Palsy Day tomorrow in parts of the world, today in some parts of the world. So today was, I'm bringing awareness. I don't need to make you aware of what cerebral palsy is. You should know what it is. You're dealing with it, you're living with it, you're helping care for it. Today, I wanted to make those of you who are fearful or demotivated in using your vibration plate, I want you to get on it. And if you've been holding back because of fear, there's no reason. I appreciate you giving me your time today. I won't take up any more of it. Don't work too hard, you guys. Have a great rest of your week and start moving and feeling better. You're only limited by your imagination and your range of motion. And like I said, if you need technical assistance or support, I am available for coaching. And for those of you that are therapists, I want to put families in touch with you. Please make a comment if you're a trainer, if you're an enthusiast like me that's been using it. Please make a comment on the post yesterday. I'm going to make a list so people know what other resources are available out there. Have a great rest of your week, guys. Thank you again, absolutely so much for being here and supporting my group and my ramblings. Have a great rest of your day.